Okay, are we recorded at all? Is this being recorded?
Okay, good.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. This is a work session to go over the general fund budget proposed by the Finance Department. Are you going to call the attendance? Do we need to do that loudly?
Okay, you bet. Bob.
Here.
Eric.
Here.
Jay.
He will be a little late.
Kurt.
Here.
Nancy.
Yes.
Cindy.
Excused.
And Mark.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't here for the last work session when you went over the enterprise funds, so that isn't a topic today.
No, we're not going to do that again.
What's that?
We're not going to do that again.
Well, that lasted a while, didn't it? So we'll address this starting the first reading of the budget for this year will be May 1st. That will be a noon meeting. The second reading of the budget ordinance will be May 15th. That'll be an evening meeting. And then the third and final reading of the budget ordinance will be June 5th, and that'll be a 6 in the evening meeting. So today we're just here to discuss amongst assembly members and administration the proposed budget. Any decisions will be made starting on the first reading. So anybody have any comments on what's been presented?
Not at this point, but...
No? So how do you want to go over it? Do you want to go over it?
So I was just going to go do a run through,
Okay.
and then stop me if you have questions. I might refer to some of the department heads to talk about some things, and we'll start with, does everyone have one of these? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is page numbers on it, so I'll be referring to some of the page numbers.
Perfect.
So the general fund has a fund balance of $3.7 million. Our fund budget policy is between 4 and 6 months of operating expenses, which is $2.9 million, and the high would be $4.3 million. So we're right in the middle. So we're kind of right where we need to be. That's what I feel like. The charts on the first page. General fund revenue sources, you can get a feel for how much of the general fund is being covered by taxes. The charges for services, that's mainly overhead charges to the enterprise funds. They pay for a large portion of admin, assembly, finance, things that we do for them, like accounts payable, payroll, all of that we take care of for them, so they reimburse us for that. On the lower chart is the general fund expenditures. You can see that public safety is the largest expense, and that's the police, jail, and fire department. The school is second, and then the general government is third, general government being assembly, admin, finance, IT. So on the second page, I guess it would be page number 1 is how I numbered it. You'll see in the far right-hand column, we're going to be looking at the right-hand column a lot today, the proposed fiscal year 18 budget. You'll see at the bottom, I balanced to 0 this year. So if we want to change anything, we need to offset it somehow later on. And we'll go through that, and I'll talk about a few different places that, we could change if, the assembly felt like we needed to do that. So on page 2, we're going to start with the revenues.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, go ahead. I wanted to talk about revenue. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first line item is property taxes. So I have budgeted to increase property taxes for 2 different items. And I explained that. I don't know if you all have this sheet that had the calendar on the front, and then it had a breakdown of some just highlights of revenues and expenses. But there are 2 reasons why we increased the property taxes this year is because in this current year, the state decided that they weren't going to reimburse us as much as they usually do for our general obligation bonds for school construction debt. And so if you remember in the supplemental budget this year, we actually decided to take reserves and from the debt service fund because we had just about that amount to cover it. Well, this year, that fund is about zero now. So we don't know if the state's going to do it or not, but I think we need to increase property taxes to account for that, and we'll put it in that special fund. And if we don't, we probably will need to have a supplemental tax bill go out if they decide to do it in July or August after we've already sent out our initial tax bill. So it would not go into the general fund. It would go straight to the debt service fund to be spent just on those bonds. They are the second bond on the list, which is for the Aquatic Center, and then the Aquatic Center third bond, and school deferred maintenance, and vocational education building. So, and the other reason why.
Jody, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does your amount on the top line on property taxes, does that now include the 0.4?
Yes.
Okay. And what are we hearing? The last I heard, it was still up in the air.
Still up in there. So they tried, someone made an amendment to cut it 50% instead of just 25.
Right.
And all of these communities went out and, complained and went to legislature and talked about it. And then they decided to not do anything. So right now they're not doing anything, but they have asked for the numbers for 25%. So it could happen, just like it did this year. So I'd rather be prepared than not. So
Jody, in worst case, or a worst scenario, if they cut it 50% like they were proposing, then we'd have to raise the millage rate another 4 mils on top of this?
0.4 mils.
0.4s, yeah.
Or take it out of general fund or something, reserves.
But that's a slope that'll,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I want to say I don't think they'll do that, but you never know. I don't.
Yeah.
If I remember right, last time it was the governor who sliced that as part of trying to balance the budget. And there's concern that the Senate and the House are not going to necessarily come to agreement and may very well have to come to that point again.
Right. And he didn't like to
No, he didn't
have
like
to do that, but he had to do something to get the
Correct.
margin closer.
So, and the second reason the property tax went up is because we are trying to ratchet down the amount of secure all schools funds that we use for the school so we can keep that fund around longer. Currently, there's $3.7 million in that fund. And this current year, we are using $500,000 of it to fund the school. And last year, we used $600,000. And this next year, fiscal year 18, I want to use $400,000. So we're just, gradually decreasing our reliance on this fund and increasing property taxes to offset it. Now, this is something the Assembly might want to change. I mean, maybe you don't, if we keep doing $400,000 with this $3.7 million we have, we're going to have this fund for another 9 years. And, that's to say that the federal government isn't going to give us any more secure rural schools money, which is totally up in the air. We don't know. So, that's something, we're just being really conservative with that because we don't want to use that fund up and rely on it, as much as we do and say, oh, how are we going to make up $500,000 next year? So that's just something to think about. So, and to back up to the GO bonds, that would just be for service area 1. That would not be for area wide because those bonds aren't being paid by people outside of service area 1. Sales tax, if we go down further, are there any questions about that before I move on to sales tax?
Just one thing about reducing the funding to the school to $400,000. So it'd be 7 years if we kept it like it is, correct, roughly? 7 times 5 is would be $3.5 million, so we gain a couple of years. And
Yep.
raise the property tax to cover those 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then as part of that, I thought on service area one, we were up against the cap that was, in the charter. I thought.
No, we have, so you add up the area, the education and the general services, and that would be 9 mills. We still have 1 mill. So it's the GO bond debt does not go towards that 10 mil cap.
Okay.
So we have about $250,000 of room to play with. We could increase it the budget, $250,000, and increase property taxes to the cap if we want to. But I know that, we really don't want to raise taxes, so we've started cutting some things, which you've heard about. And so that's a discussion that we could have. If you feel like funding something that's not in this budget, you can raise the property tax rate if you want. It's up to the assembly.
Just for the record, Member Greger is with us.
Howdy.
So, hi, Jay.
So sales tax, we budgeted sales tax at the same level the borough brought in for fiscal year 16. It went down in fiscal year 16. It's actually down a little bit right now as well. It went down last year 5%. This year it's down about 3%. I'm hoping that is just from the not a very good fishing season last summer. And our big numbers are coming up in May and June and July. So we'll see what happens there. And fish tax. Oh, I skipped over tobacco tax. Tobacco tax is I budgeted $130,000. And fish tax, I budgeted $850,000. On page 13, you'll see that there is a transfer out to the harbor of $550,000. What we did with the fish tax is we had kind of ratcheted how much the general fund was keeping of fish tax. We're down to about $250,000 this year. I bumped it back up $50,000. The general fund, I've budgeted that the general fund's going to keep $300,000 of fish tax this year and give the remainder to the harbor. So that's a little bit different than what we had done last year, or this current year, I should say. I skipped over the CCAD grant. That looks like it's up just a little bit. Kelly, do you mind talking about the CCAD grant and what we use it for?
Yeah, that's for our drug investigative.
Into a microphone, please. Sorry, Kelly.
Those are for our dedicated drug investigative efforts, and the state has changed the way they do business a little bit. Because those are federal pass-through funds that were approved on the state fiscal year, there was always an offset. So the state's created a new fiscal year for these pass-through grants that runs the calendar year. So actually the grants are up quite a bit. In the past, we had gotten around $60,000 a year for the entire year. The 70 we got this year are just going to cover July through December 31st, and then a new grant cycle will start that will reapply for grants at that point for the next calendar year. So if things go well, like we hope they will, we'll be getting a little over double for that line item than we have in the past.
What's your alternative, Kelly, if it doesn't happen?
Well, then we need to make a decision on if we want to keep a dedicated position assigned to that effort or not. In the past, they've funded probably just over half of that position, and we've taken care of the other half.
Thank you.
So actually, we're looking good, though, because proposed budget is $70,000. That's only for 5 months. Is we on the new?
That's 6 months, July 1st to December 31st.
Right, and the numbers prior to that, like fiscal year 16, 17, that was for the entire 12 months.
Yes, that's correct.
Now I understand it.
Debbie, can I get a hard copy of this, please?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. I'm just scrolling through on my iPad here.
Oh, here's.
You have to flip a page instead. I appreciate it very much.
Sorry about that.
No apologies. Thank you.
So under state shared revenue, a little bit further down, you'll see a line item called Community Assistance Program. That was Community Revenue Sharing. They renamed it Community Assistance Program. which is kind of scary. So we know that we're going to get $342,000 this next year. That, when we were a city, that was about what we averaged getting. And then it got bumped up to $536,000 when we became a borough. And now they've made some cuts to it. If we were still a city right now, we'd only be getting about $90,000. Going down, we have the DOT airport security officer, the 9th officer, and that's budgeted at $94,000. We have the jail contract and public safety agreement, $173,000. Kelly, do you want to explain where we are at with the jail contract? Because it has decreased significantly over the last couple of years.
It's maintained since FY15. That's when the governor made the blanket cuts. I think we got a 45% cut that year, and since then it's maintained at that same rate. I talked to DOC earlier, and they don't anticipate any changes this year, but next year's still up in the air.
Okay, next page, page 3. No big changes there. Investment income, that's about in the middle of the page, $99,000. I looked today, and our average is a 1.34% rate of our investments. Very low risk CDs. So we're not bringing in a lot of money there. Further down, that's the overhead that I talked about, that the enterprise funds pay the general fund for services that they receive. And then at the very last line, the $400,000 for National Forest Receipts schools, that's the money that we would transfer in from that fund to help fund the school. So you see, if you look at that entire line, a few years ago, we were using $605,000, $600,000. This year is $500,000. Next year, $400,000. So again, that's a number that could be changed depending on the assembly.
That's all secure rural schools money, right? Or is that?
Yes. That's,
If I may, and this is just not that we want to, we're suggesting changing anything. Our minimum contribution to the school is just over 1.1 million. We currently give the school 1.8 million. And this is where a lot of that comes from, is the secure rural schools line. So big cut to the school if we ever had to go to that minimum level of funding. I'm not sure how they would be able to handle that.
That minimum level set by
the state.
state?
And that's just a projected number right now. I don't think anything is completely finalized. Okay, page 4. It's the assembly's budget and admin and the attorney. The assembly's budget went down a little bit just because from this current year, because we are not hosting another Southeast Conference. Admin looks the same. Attorney looks the same. Page 5. Information services. So I budgeted for a part-time IT position, which would be a new position. We used to have a full-time IT position in the borough, and we cut it, and we went with a contract IT company, which is what we use today. But over the past few years, the borough has gone through some pretty serious advancements in our use of technology, and having a person on site would be really helpful. The borough has at least 12 buildings containing employees that are using technology. This building has some major network capabilities that we don't all quite understand and can't fix ourselves. This is something that the assembly, could cut. all the department heads that I've talked to have been excited about having at least someone on hand, at least part of each day. It's, and, and it's created a lot more work for department heads and other employees. We're taking on, you have Steve doing your iPads right now, that takes up a lot of time. So, anyway, that's something new in the budget. And then hopefully we could cut back the hours that we use right now for the contract IT company that we use. They actually were saying that we would need to bump up our hours quite a bit because we've utilized them so much this year. And basically we're not paying them enough, so they are going to increase their contract. But with the thought of us actually having someone on staff, perhaps, they're just going to hold off and wait and see what we do.
Is that part-time, is that going to require us to pay benefits?
Yes.
So they would be essentially building a retirement we would have to pay when they reach retirement age as well?
Yes, and I don't know when we no longer had an IT position, because we used to have a full-time IT position, if PERS still charges us for that, to pay into that position.
Well, we haven't gone below our minimum, so there's been no questions, basically. It's a position that we have just not filled at this time, is all. If we went below our minimum amount that we send to them every year, then we would definitely hear about it. But we have not. We don't.
So you're talking PERS?
Yes. That minimum was set like in 2008, so
And
something like
we have
that.
to pay PERS on anyone that works over 15 hours?
Correct.
Regularly?
And health insurance, 20 hours.
So Mark's question was, so we would be paying in retirement benefits and everything along with it?
Yes, we would.
Okay.
So if we had a full-time IT person, I remember it was Greg Ball, I believe, so this would just be kind of refilling that at a half-time basis?
Yes.
And we'd still keep the contract?
With PCS.
We would, but we would cut it back a lot. We'd need to sit down and define, okay, this is their role, like maybe just doing backups or things, and then this is the IT role, and then this is still the department head role, like posting stuff to the website and things like that, just different roles.
Jody, have you thought or computed how a little impact or save man hours, for lack of a better way to put it? Like, Steve's an expensive guy to have working on iPads. Like, so have you kind of run numbers on how that would,
Yeah,
the efficiency of it, I guess?
Well, I asked, are you talking about how much we pay the?
Yeah, versus,
And
yeah.
So I asked the hospital how much they pay their IT position, and they said between 27 and, I don't know what the higher number was, 35 or something. I budgeted 20 hours at $30 an hour. That's just a number I put in. It's just a budget number, so. I don't know. I think it depends on what qualifications that person would have and what they could actually do for us.
But you put it in there because you think it could save time and money for the borough and staff.
Ah,
Got
sanity.
it. And sanity, of course. Thanks.
Just for curiosity's sake, what is this technology costing us with the contract plus this $49,000 a year?
Our contract is, I want to say it's about $40,000 a year. So I don't know what we could cut that back
Okay.
to be, but
And just to kind of talk in broader pictures, what does it buy us? Majority of the borough buildings are on our own fiber network, so we're connected, and so it's managing that network. They've stopped installing, and AT&T really doesn't support them anymore, the old copper wired phone system. So they're moving to phones that are basically called IP phones. So each of these phones is it's same as an iPad or a computer, has its own separate IP address, and you have a whole network associated with the phone system, and which we didn't used to have when I first got here. As the old copper phone system has become obsolete and AT&T has told us they no longer support it, they've gone to these. So now we have an internal network that has to be managed related to computers, but we also have one now on for phone system. In this new building, to get the energy efficiency piece, you've got a HVAC system that's basically all computerized, so people can dial into it and make changes, and all of that has to be managed. Our maintenance folks will be doing that. My guess is very little on the IT guy side, but again, technology that runs through our network and has to be managed. We have the handheld devices like iPads and iPhones. These hit us here, but also at the library. We have the website itself and all of that goes into that. We also have issues with desktop support. I don't expect that to go to anybody we hire. These days, our vendor that we call, so an employee has a problem with their desktop, they can call in, they dial in actually to that desktop, actually take over and can fix it probably a lot more efficiently than having us have somebody run around the borough looking for problems. So that would likely stay with our existing vendor. They also manage all of our IT purchases, which are switches, computers, iPhones, iPads, and use government contracting to basically manage all of that so we get the best price on it. They configure those for us over the telephone usually and make sure they're ready with all the right software loaded to them.
And they've been traveling here to install those things.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that's not included.
and that's a
in the
big
contract.
piece of it right there. Yeah, the travel to come here to install all this. We've moved a lot of the borough stuff for security purposes away from hardware, meaning $30,000 or $40,000 server, to the cloud, which is more secure for us and also allows us better use of space. So we didn't have to build bigger rooms here to house this stuff. It's less costly to have the hardware. You don't have to plan for repairing it. You'd have to pay for the subscription to be able to move that processing out to the cloud. And then we have just the general, the Parks and Rec tracking system that handles their membership, the billing system that we use to send out utility bills. What am I missing, Jody? Harbor billing.
Did you talk about the
Except
wireless?
credit cards, the wireless connection to a lot of our facilities, like the Baylor and
water plants. They're
that allows them
connections,
to-
So they lose the internet all the time.
yeah. So it's setting up wireless for the public here in this building as well as in places like the library and managing that so that we have what we want without overpaying for it. So it's a community that's become very expecting of a lot of this stuff. Expect wireless to be at the library, expecting wireless to be in this building and have access. That just Granicus alone, which is the system that we use to record these meetings and make it all work together. Well, Granicus is a separate vendor. Our IT provider has to deal with that running on our network and stuff. So it's become a lot more complex than it was, let's say, 5, even 10 years ago. And what we're running into is it's harder and harder for us to keep up with the demands of that. So we're not done looking through it. We got to kind of figure out from the vendor that sells what can they do and continue to do and what kind of price break they can give us. But if you add all the trips they've made associated with this building has strained our budget this past year, although a lot of that's charged to the project. So, did I get it all?
I think you did really well. Further down on the IT budget, we are budgeting for some CAMA software. The state assessor has wrote to most of the communities in Alaska still on a paper filing system for property taxes saying you need to take this digitally. So it's a municipal assessment record system that will pretty much store everything that the assessor needs online. So in a program, we're actually demoing a program tomorrow that Charles Horan built in Sitka. And Sitka, they got one of these letters from the state assessor, and they just actually purchased this software a few months ago. Wrangell purchased it last fall. I've just been kind of holding off to see how the software goes with them, but we're sort of on a deadline, according to the state assessors, that we need to start looking and purchasing something. Basically, the assessor then would go around with an iPad, and take pictures of the properties, just input everything. In fact, if you're interested in coming and seeing a demo of it, it's tomorrow at 3 in the conference room. It's in FileMaker, which a lot of us didn't realize they still used, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. It could integrate with our GIS system, which would be really cool. So Liz would be able to pull out how many 4-bedroom houses there were in Petersburg, or, just with the click of a button instead of, we can't do that now. We can't do any of that reporting like that now. This program also is customized, so it'll just print out all of the state reports that the state assessor wants. So, yeah, it's another unfunded mandate. It's probably going to cost about $60,000, $20,000 a year. And so I budgeted for that as well.
Did you say that was each year then we had another $20,000 on top
For
of
3
it?
years.
For 3 years? And
Yeah.
then,
And then we own it.
And again, to recap what Jody said, this is a mandate from the state assessor that we have to go to some form of digital computer assessment system and move away from the card system.
Well,
which
and
we have.
we can pick what system we want, but a lot of these mass appraisal systems are like $150,000. So, for really large communities, and we can't afford something that size. So, at the bottom of page 5 is my budget. The only thing really to note is credit card fees are going up. I budgeted this year $22,000, which it looks like is going to be low because last year the actual was almost $27,000. This is just everyone, the fees we pay for people using their credit card for property taxes. So it's something to think about, whether we want to charge a convenience fee, which we can, for people to use their credit card to pay their property taxes. We haven't to this point, but I'm thinking about it, seriously thinking about it.
Jody, what's the credit card fee?
Like a certain percentage. Well, it's based on
To
a
us.
bunch of different things. It's roughly around 2%, though. But, it's a little bit more if someone uses a signature card, which is Alaska Airlines card, right? So everyone uses those here. So, it's a little bit more than that. And then, it just depends on if it's a MasterCard or a Visa and how much, the amount is. And they also charge you a base rate. And so there's multiple factors.
Depending on how greedy each card is.
Yeah.
So
You
basically,
do get a municipal rate, which is a little bit lower, but not that much lower.
the budget's getting tight enough where we're looking closer and closer for every
Yeah.
$5,000, just so people, if anybody's listening, but
Yeah, it seems silly to me that we're actually picking up that expense when I think they charge me at the grocery stores or, other places, they'll tack on. Some of these places say I won't take a credit card unless I charge you another 2.5% or whatever it is, But it wouldn't be unreasonable to say, just to use your credit card and realize that you're going to pay another 2.5%.
And it's really common, like,
Yeah.
for paying property taxes,
Yeah.
to charge a fee
Yeah.
for that. So most communities do it. So we just haven't.
That'll be
had-
something we'll keep an eye on.
Yeah. On page 7, the fire department. There. Oh, did I skip 6?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kelly. No,
we were just going
the most important.
Kelly didn't seem to mind it a bit.
Not ready to leave.
Page 6, police and jail. There's not really anything that's out of the norm here. Did anyone have any questions? Or Kelly, did you have any comments about this budget? We did move some of the expenses to the E911 surcharge special revenue fund, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Okay. All right, page 7, Fire Department. And again, this is the salaries here. It's Sandy and Ryan and a lot of volunteers. How many volunteers do you think you have? 65. And the officers get stipends, correct? Is that how
The volunteers don't get
the volunteers don't get anything?
volunteer officers.
There isn't really anything here. Does anyone have any questions for Sandy on the fire department?
Looks like it's staying fairly consistent.
Yes, it is. On page 8,
downward.
Public Works.
Actually, can I back up to Sandy's budget? Knock on wood, and thanks to Sandy and the other volunteer leadership, we've kept this budget the way it is. I can tell you, they could desperately use another full-time, EMS, EMT person. I mean, we are struggling in that area, which is our most active in the sense of somebody to be in the ambulance. If if the community as a whole doesn't continue to support that, we're not that far away from having to hire another permanent person to add to this to make sure we have the personnel to run ambulances. So I'm not saying we're having to do it, but it's potentially out there, and it wouldn't take a whole lot. We lose a few more volunteers and don't replace them in that area, and we're going to have to be coming back to you to talk about hiring another, permanent staff member there. So.
But that's not budgeted in
No, it is not.
proposals.
Sandy, sorry.
And not just to respond to emergency calls, but I could have so many other things for them to do because I'm really overwhelmed with what I do. So I'm not asking for a person right now because I understand the budget crunch, but just keep it in mind.
Andy, what would an EMS paramedic cost our town if we were to need to hire somebody like that?
That's a great question. I don't know because I'm not asking for one right now.
Can you hypothesize? I mean, is it $100,000 with benefits, or is it something like $40,000?
I don't know.
Okay.
I truly haven't looked.
Okay.
I think the going rate in Anchorage is probably somewhere around $20 an hour that they get paid. So I don't know on top of that with benefits and stuff what that would be.
Okay.
I'm just guessing. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, page 8, Public Works. Public Works is another budget that has stayed pretty consistent. Looking at, yeah, does anyone have any questions about that? Carl?
Actually, I did have a question, but this is back to the fire department, so back to Sandy. And it was kind of concerning the vehicle replacement. I see that, you've dropped $20,000 over the course of the last just few years. And I know, and was just wondering, how that aligns well with our need for purchasing a new ambulance.
This is actually a function of what the motor pool is doing to try and spend down the reserve that we have in the motor pool.
Okay.
We've decreased the contributions to general fund departments mostly to save some money in the budget, but there's still, I think the fire department has their portion of the replacement fund is about 1.2 million, something like that. So there's plenty of money for them to buy equipment when they need to.
I know it was just this weekend we had the state our mass casualty drill, and it was unfortunate, but we had one of our ambulances not start, and it was kind of sad to see. It's really really exciting to be able to have a potential of a new rig to keep our streets safe.
Okay, we're going to go to page 9, Community Development. Liz's budget. So in this budget is her and Molly Tiber, the mapping clerk, and Joe Nelson. Or not Joe Nelson, Joe Bernoulli, excuse me, building inspector.
So there's 3 people in this.
Yes.
2 and a half. Molly works.
Yeah, Molly's part-time. And soon to be living in this building now. Actually, they should be moving in the next month or so.
Liz's salary doesn't come out of part of this either?
Oh, yes, Liz's does.
So Liz, Joe,
Molly.
Molly, okay. Maybe I didn't hear Liz.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, next page, page 10, community services. A portion of the Clausen Museum's budget is going to be paid from the transient room tax funds. With those funds, you have to use them on tourism, visitor-related. So the museum is a good fit to do that with. The other $22,000 is budgeted into the general fund. I budgeted for KFSK in this fund. We've been talking over the last couple of years of moving KFSK into either the assembly's budget or the admin budget because of because of all the work that they do for us. They sent us an invoice. I asked them to invoice us as well as fill out the grant request form, just so everyone could see, how many hours they work for the borough, basically, providing transparency of what we do to the general public. And it was about $35,000. And they had forgotten, one thing they had even forgotten on there, which Mara pointed out to me, is the schools and their meetings. So that was one other thing. I did not receive any funds from Mountain View Food Services or any grant application from Mountain View Food Services. At one point I talked with Sammy Parker and she said, when do I request money? I said, now I'll email the form to you again. And I never got it back, and I emailed her a couple follow-up emails and I didn't hear anything. So I have no request from them, so they are not in the budget. And I did not put in this budget for mental health services because I couldn't make the borough general fund balance with it in there. And then the $1.8 million is also in this budget for the school, which has stayed consistent for many, many years. Page 11.
Oh, Jody, did Kupernoff put in the request for the?
Oh, I'm glad that you mentioned that. No, they never put in a request. They just, a few years ago when we formed a borough, they stopped getting PILT. And they said, well, you should pay us part of your PILT money. And so the assembly approved a resolution to do that for a couple of years. And I took that out of the budget as well. They do get around $90,000 a year for community revenue sharing, that community assistance, just for being a city. So
They also got PILT funds before, too.
yeah, right, which is about between $4,000 and $5,000. Yes, and that's what I didn't budget for that for this year.
They didn't ask for it?
They never. Well, no, they
just assuming?
They probably are assuming that it's in here.
Yes. But I don't see it as the community services either. It's a different pot to me. It's something that they had before the borough was formed. Go ahead.
Well, and it is it's payment of lieu of taxes, and they don't charge taxes to their residents, so it's questionable whether they should be getting it.
So this could be a discussion that we have, I'm assuming, during one of the 3 readings coming up, potentially.
Back to the Clausen Museum, I was trying to add up all that. Does the budget stay the same when we add everything back together as it was last year?
For Clausen?
Yes.
Yes, 42, yes. Okay, page 11, library. This has stayed consistent. Unless there's any questions, I'm just gonna keep going. The Parks and Rec. So, Parks and Rec, if you look at the capital outlay at the bottom of Parks and Rec's budget, at the bottom of page 12, there are a few things that are new. They're budgeting for a basketball scoreboard in the community gym. The one in there is broken. And they're budgeting for a replacement pump for the lap pool, which I believe you've said has never been replaced. And what did you say about the pump? You've replaced the pump in the warm water pool? Mm-hmm. And if the pump was to break, how long of a time lag would it be? How long would the pool be closed?
Depending on the shipping and getting them to actually start the building of the pump when we called them, we could be closed anywhere from a month to 2 months.
Whoa.
So we have a 10-year-old pump on the lap pool that hasn't been replaced yet and is probably going to go out any time now. So what we're looking to do is just make sure we've got something when it does.
Preventative, to have it on hand, since they have to build it when you order it. Interesting.
Go ahead and just start talking about your lighting replacement.
The lights in the aquatic center, you guys put forth $35,000 last year. That $35,000 is still there, and we're looking to roll it in, keep it, and roll it into this next year coming up. I have been in contact with a couple of different lighting manufacturers and companies, and including the Sitka Electric. They were letting me know that on Sitka Electric, with LEDs, what we're looking to do is increase, we have to come up to a safety compliance level in our aquatic center. And we have to increase the lighting level in there, as well as replace the current lights that we have. So our lights are all going out, and right now it costs us anywhere from $800 to $2,000 a year to just replace the current lights. And our current lighting fixtures would cost about $850 to $1,100 if we wanted to keep with the current ones. We have 48 lighting fixtures, and after talking with Sitka Electric, he is thinking that he could give us a pretty good chlorine-resistant, humidity-resistant LED fixture for $1,300. So just for the fixtures alone, on the low side of things, we're looking at about $62,000. So looking with them coming in and working with us and taking out the current fixtures, paying for the cost of disposal, and putting in the new fixtures for their time and effort, he's estimating, this is a very rough estimate, of about $100,000. So, yeah. That's one of the companies. Another company I got in contact with is kind of out of the picture because they're estimating $140,000 just for the fixtures themselves. So they're kind of no longer in the picture. But.
So this rolls the last year's part of the budget in here also. Is that what we have here?
No, actually, so the total that we would have for lights is $120,000.
Okay. And then does that then solve the problems you have of trying to replace some of the bulbs up there and some of those light fixtures and stuff that you can't?
So what they're estimating is that some of these light fixtures would be able to live for about 10 years without needing to be replaced. So over time, it's going to save us cost and energy efficiency because we're switching to an LED fixture, as well as repair and maintenance cost of time that he's going to have to spend replacing those lights.
Kind of referring back to what Joe was talking about becoming more energy efficient overall. Do you have any calculations as to how much money this could save in electricity costs?
It depends on the fixtures that we choose, but they...
Usually lighting projects, they say, I've taken a couple, or at a conference they've talked about this a lot, they pay back themselves in less than 5 years usually, so... I don't know if everyone's noticed how dark it is in the pool. If you haven't, go visit it. Luckily, it's summertime right now, so it's light all the time, but this fall is going to be really dark.
So is this lighting job something that would potentially happen before fall? Or if the funding was there, or?
If we can get yes, if the funding's there, then I'm going to jump on it immediately and get the, I'm so bad at this, RFPs, what's the right? I'm going to get the proposals, or the request for proposals out there as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it would be really helpful, too, if you could come up with those numbers in real, you know, like on paper that says that, instead of just by hearsay, that in 5 years we're going to make up the cost of all that stuff, because I'm all about spending a little bit of money to save money on the other end. So you know,
Well,
if this is indeed true,
Yeah.
then I'm in support of that.
Well, and whoever Chandra gets the lights from, they should have that already.
Yeah,
To
okay.
provide that too.
So
So
we
which
gotta-
you will ultimately approve,
Right.
because it will come back to you, because it'll be over $30,000.
We see the logic, but I want everybody out there
Yeah.
to see the logic.
And we can make that part of the RFP as well, that
Yes.
part of the information we want a vendor to provide is the, you know, an estimated payback on energy savings. So.
Excellent.
Perfect, yeah.
Helpful information.
Okay, so that is the, oh, no, we have one more page, page 13, non-departmental. This is just everything that, this actually gets billed out to the enterprise funds to, you know, alcohol, drug testing, records management things, Granicus, our accounting software, which is the PCS Insight Connect Online line item, some travel and training, mostly training, not really travel. And then down below that, we have budgeted $90,000 in contingency. We normally budget 1% of the entire general fund budget. So this is also an area that we could reduce, you know, if you were looking for a little bit of room to fund something else.
Why did you choose 90 this year as opposed to like 19 and 15, 16, 30, and 14, 15? Where were you coming from?
Well, in those years, we had also budgeted 90,000, but that's just, those were the actuals.
Ah, gotcha.
So you never know what is going to happen.
That's why it's a contingency. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then you'll see down there at the operating transfers out, there's $550,000 of the fish tax will go out to the harbor. And then we're the $80,000 going to assisted living for an additional subsidy. So. And that's the end of the general fund. And then we just have a few more funds to look at real quick. On page 15, the miscellaneous grants. These are just smaller general fund grants that we place here so we can easily track them. You know, some of those state grants for the Sandy Beach shelter and the bathrooms. Library grants that they get a lot of little ones, and we just put them in here to track them better. I did include this year, an individual gave the Parks and Rec director $10,000 to put a light up at the skating rink, up at the ball field. And still investigating whether that can be done, is going to be done, but someone had written the borough a check and we needed to put it somewhere, so it's going in this fund. If it's determined that it can happen, we'll just write a check back out to the individual to give it back to them. But stay tuned for that. That might be hearing about that at some point. And then the aquatic center lighting replacement, the $35,000 that's in this year's budget. I'm transferring it to this fund so it's not lost at the end of the year, because she's not going to be spending it yet. So that's that money. On the next page is the Economic Development Fund. This is the fund that we give money, you give money to PEDC for projects. There's also that fire sprinkler loan guarantee program. As of today, no one's utilized that program, but It's for the downtown buildings, to get a lower interest rate to put a sprinkler system in their buildings. And then there is that $165,000 of a transfer to the water fund to help pay for some Cabin Creek and Scow Bay water lines that these will mature soon, actually, 2020 and 2024, so that transfer won't be needed anymore.
Was this fire sprinkler program, that was what, for 3 years, wasn't it? We approved it for? Was that? And then after that, it died? I don't remember the...
I don't remember. I'll look and let you know.
I can't remember if there was a
I didn't
sunset
realize
on
there
it.
was a sunset
An end
on
date?
it, but I'll look.
Don't remember.
No one, sorry, go ahead.
I don't remember there being a sunset,
Me
but
either.
we'll look.
But no one's taken advantage of that program to date.
Right.
Thank you.
So Jody, how much money did we get from the federal government when this fund was started? Remember? That's where this came from, timber receipts.
I want to say it was $6 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that number in my office somewhere. I can find it. For you?
So we still have a
Right in
good
the
portion of
beginning,
it.
I wasn't here, but I believe right in the beginning, the assembly or the council at that time, used to give grants and things to businesses, and then loans, but then the loans didn't end up being loans, and they ended up being grants, and it was kind of a mess, yeah.
So that policy isn't in place anymore?
No.
Okay.
Page 17. This is the Secure Rural Schools funds. Fund 240, that's the schools. So I haven't budgeted to receive any more money from that program. And then I just budgeted out the transfer out of $400,000. And then we also just put in the budget about $75,000 in case there's any capital improvements that need to be done. That they can draw from that fund too as well to do those, maintenance, new windows or whatnot. And then there's $9,000 in the roads fund that Carl's going to use this next year to fill in some potholes before it is empty. So.
Jody or Steve, in terms of secure rural schools, have we heard anything else from our lobbyist in Washington?
No. I think the program's done. But anything can happen. It's not really being talked about much other than by National Association of Counties. They're kind of trying to keep reminding certain legislatures that, hey, this is still out there. But we're not seeing any traction in Congress at all. You may be aware there'll be a vote this week on a continuing resolution to fund the U.S. government. There's been no discussion on secure rural schools or PILT, for that matter, being in there. So that can happen at the last minute in part of those negotiations, but at this point, we're assuming no more secure rural schools.
We're acting accordingly, in other words. Thank you, Steve.
Jody, I'm going to expose my ignorance here. This fund balance of $4.2 million, what's that? Where's that at?
That was the fund balance at the end of fiscal year 16, so last June 30. So I know how much we're paying the school this year, and so at the end of fiscal year 17, which we're currently in, which ends June 30, we will have $3.7 million.
Okay, so that's where that number came from.
3.7
That's money that was put away
Okay.
instead of spending it.
Yeah.
That's a good thing
That's
that
the
happened.
one we're talking about slowly reducing and holding on to it as long as possible.
So for clarity again, for me, I guess, more than everybody else might understand, but you're talking about raising service area 1 mill rate by 4 mills, and that will help offset the $100,000 less that we're giving to the school this year?
No, that 0.4 mils, that was for the GO bond.
Just the bonds?
Debt reimbursement, that's
If the school, if the,
one. For this school, now we said, everyone would pay for education area-wide. So we had been charging outside service area 1 everywhere 4 mills. Well, if everyone's going to pay for education, then everyone needs to pay the same millage rate for education, and it's 4.4 mills for everyone.
That's just if the state reduces the refund by 25%, right?
Well, if the budget, as it is now, passes, we will raise the area-wide mill rate 0.4 mils on top of the amount for the, because we have no way to anticipate what the state's going to do. So, I mean, that's, am I saying that right, Jody?
Yeah, so I want to clarify this. So for the GO bond debt, that'll increase the service area 1 by 4 mils. And then 0.4 mils, so $40 per $100,000 of assessed value. And then if you choose to use less secure rural schools money and, ratchet down to $400,000, that means we're going to need 1.4 million of property tax money to pay the schools, because they want 1.8 million. So this year, currently, we're using 1.3 million of property tax money for the schools. So, and again, that could change if you want to change this. So that would mean that everyone area-wide pays 4.4 mils. So that's an increase for area-wide, people outside service area 1, of 0.4 mils, but that's only an increase of 0.2 mils for people in service area 1, because we were already paying 4.2 mils last year. Last year we didn't do this. We left area-wide mill rate at 4 mils. And we've talked about it, and, it was kind of under everyone's understanding that education should be paid by everyone. And so everyone should pay the same millage rate for the schools. And so that would be 4.4 mils. If you leave outside service area 1 at 4 mils, that's going to mean service area 1 will have to pay more than 4.4 mils to compensate for what outside service area 1 isn't paying. Does that make sense?
Jody, what's our options if we choose not to, if the state doesn't give us the money for the bond debt, and we were to choose not to go out and raise service area 1 by 0.4 mil, what's our options?
Could take reserves from the general fund, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend doing that. The voters voted for these bonds, and they said, I will pay property taxes, to build these things for the borough, in the borough. And so, yes, it was their understanding that the state should, was going to pay a certain, 60% of some of these, 70% in the case of the school deferred maintenance. And the state should, but, yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would increase the property taxes.
And again, there's
slippery slope.
There's 2 different 0.4 mils we're talking about, 2 different programs. One is the deferred maintenance, the bonds. The other is the area-wide 0.4 increase. In other words, both service area 1 and service area 2 going up in property tax to pay for the extra 100,000 that we'd fund from property taxes rather than from the bank account.
So to make it easy for you, if you didn't want to raise property taxes in service area 1 for the school, and you wanted to use more secure rural schools money, you would need to make a motion probably to transfer in $550,000 of secure rural schools money, and then the remainder of $1,250,000, would be from property taxes. And this would bring the mill rate area-wide down to 4 mils, most likely.
By taking more money out of the secure roll fund bank account.
Right. So then that would put us down to, we'd have money left for approximately
7 years.
2 years.
Or there's 3.7. Here, make me do the math. 5 years, 5 years?
5 years.
Oh, 5 years.
5 times 5 is 250, right? Would it be, or
You're right. 7.
7 years?
7.
Fewer years.
Thought.
I used the calculator, so that's why.
We're not,
Get my phone out.
I know we're not in a crisis position yet, but, you know, I'm always in favor of if you can squirrel a little away, or at least well, let's just pull the throttle back. We're not making as much speed against the tide now. You know, we're not actually banking money. All we're doing is just preserving what little money we have for a longer period of time.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I just
Well, I
think
know
this
the
is a
interesting
no-brainer.
is what
Everybody's got to go up
happens.
0.4 mil.
Well,
It's just a
You ha-
no-brainer. Yeah.
You see what the public input is, but you have to pay more taxes to extend it.
Because
for 2
eventually
more
we're going
years.
to pay. You know, I would rather pay a little bit on the front side and then maybe hope that if big oil, you know, comes down the tube or something else comes down the line that would help supplement this. But in the
Some other
meantime-
revenue source.
Yeah, some other revenue source. But I don't think we ought to be taking a chance by just spending all our reserves, you know.
Well, and this is an annual endeavor, too. I mean, we could, if we decided to fund it with $500,000 this year, next year, we could make it 400. So,
Exactly.
Well, we can see what happens too. Yeah,
you know,
they reauthorize it.
this isn't talked about our budget, but you have to remember that half the House has already passed an income tax legislation. Part of that income tax legislation, if it hasn't changed, is the 10% capital gains tax. So if you sell a $100,000 piece of your infrastructure that you've saved, you're going to pay $10,000 to the state as well as your federal capital gains tax. So, you know, I don't know how I'm not going to say how I'm going to vote on this, but you got to look at the overall picture of more taxes coming down the road. Someone has to pay for it.
Yeah.
I realize that. But who can afford to live here and pay for it is something we have to keep in mind as well.
Yep.
So,
Okay, so on page 18, property development funds. We have a new item, a marijuana excise tax. I budgeted $30,000. I talked with Gary Morgan, who would be the one, you know, collecting it this year, the only one that's so far been approved by the state in Petersburg to cultivate marijuana. And he was thinking probably at least 50,000, but I just put 30,000 to be a little more conservative.
he was thinking 50?
50?
Yeah.
I know other municipalities that have collected more than they anticipated, but
Yeah.
I don't know if we will.
Well, and we don't have any
where it goes.
plans right now
Yeah.
to spend any money. The 5,000 I budgeted for is just for administrative things when we have to record deeds or, you know, do something for, change lines and get them recorded or anything. We use this fund, so. Okay, page 19. Transit room tax fund, we're budgeting $55,000 in revenue. We budgeted the chamber's full request of $45,000, and this is where the other $20,000 for the Cluster Museum is budgeted for. So their total, like Bob asked, is $42,000. Any questions there?
Jody, actually, I do. Didn't read it before I walked in here, which is shame on me, but what are we limited to on the transient room tax, on what could be spent? I mean, for example, could we use it to maintain the flower boxes in the parks downtown?
Yes.
Could we use it to offset some of Kelly's police time during the summer with the added tourism?
I would say yes. But
I'm asking rhetorical questions.
Right.
Point is, not that we want to take this and start divvying it up right away, but it's going to increasingly, we're going to have to start thinking about things like that to try to fund the general fund, to try to keep this in balance. So, again, I like how we do it now, but we may have to do other things in future years if the revenue sources don't go a different direction than they've been going for the last few.
In the information provided to you, Jody, was there a rationale why the increase from 40,000 or 500 to 45?
I don't believe it said directly, but we have Mara Latomsky here from the chamber, and she could tell us.
In our budget this year, we budgeted several different new projects. One, we budgeted $4,000 to go towards transportation, to send one of our members to be a lobbyist in Juneau, to get the Alaska Marine Highway System restructured, and also to put funds towards Southeast Conference in order for them to restructure ferry service. So $4,000 of our budget is going towards that. We are also budgeting for education. Projects for education, whether it be a seminar for someone to come in to discuss customer service and how to pass on customer service skills to the employees here in town, or whether that be sending Dave Owens at the school to conferences like Maritime Works down in Ketchikan, or to AvTech up in Seward to be able to tell our students about some of these large industrial jobs that we would really like to have here in Petersburg versus, to help expand that area of industry here in Petersburg. So we have budgeted several different new projects, and that's why you see the increase. Last year, we had asked for, I didn't get specific in my application, but I could discuss some of that. We asked for fireworks. Previously, you as an assembly had donated towards the fireworks fund. And that didn't happen last year, so in our ask this year, we asked for it under the transient room tax fund instead of coming out of your and that's at $2,000.
Thank you.
So, I could ask more at a different point, but how much of this $4,500 increase was for a lobbyist?
Oh, it's not for a lobbyist, and it's a member, Dave Kensinger. We're just looking for him to go to Juneau and to speak in front of the lawmakers there.
For his travel?
For his travel.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not like a specific.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you.
But that's not all inclusive. I mean, it's not like we gave the $45,000 for any of those projects. It's to put towards the Southeast Conference fund that they're growing as well to work towards it.
Thank you.
Jody? With the potential, or I guess it sounds like it's happening, the uncruise having start and end stops here in Petersburg, is there a potential of more revenues to the transient room tax based on that? Increase in use?
Sales tax, yes, but I don't believe they charge bed tax I have to look at that now that you've mentioned that. I don't think in the past we've
I think they would on the uncruise thing. They've been talking about having them come in, spend a night in Petersburg before they leave the next day.
Oh, yeah.
And the reverse,
yes.
staying here before they leave town. In both of those cases, then yes, they'd pay transient room tax.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about
on the cruise
rooms
itself?
on the boat.
Sorry.
Yes.
And that's scheduled for every Friday going out, so they would be here on Friday evening and then set out on Saturday morning. So they would stay.
Yeah, so that would definitely increase it, yes.
Mara, how many folks are on that ship?
I think there's
Ships?
38.
Okay.
In couples, you'll probably get 15 to 20 rooms.
Any more questions for the transient room tax fund? Okay, page 20 is E911 surcharge fund. So that is the $2 we pay a month on our landlines and cell phones for the borough's enhanced 911 emergency communication system. Kelly, do you want to talk about some of these expenses in here?
Sure. What that fund covers is, or what we can spend that fund for, is anything we need to receive and dispatch. So we've taken some of these maintenance fees out of my budget and put them into the E911 fund so it more accurately reflects how that money comes in and goes out. But it'll pay for the software maintenance, the hardware maintenance on the radios. Long term, it will hopefully continue to build, and we'll have some money locked away for replacement when it's time to replace some of that technology, whether it be the actual phone system or the radio system. Even Spillman, our record management system, we're using that to help dispatch some of those calls. We're just trying to make sure that we are tracking that money more easily, have it going back out to that defined benefit.
So in this one Motorola annual support fee, what does that cover? That's $16,000 roughly.
That covers maintenance on the new radio systems, and that includes a trip down for the tech once a year to do preventative maintenance, for continual monitoring, any of the software updates. It's a pretty comprehensive maintenance package.
And that was part of the contract with them when we got the equipment, or?
Well, it was an estimated amount. It wasn't part of that actual contract that we paid.
And Kelly, will that be an annual fee for the remainder of our usage of the system?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, page 21, the Borough Organizational Funds. So this is the fund that we created when we became a borough because we wanted to track the $600,000 we received from the state to form a borough. We still have approximately $75,000 left. We budgeted for expenses. We don't have a plan for that $75,000, so it's just, it might help with some mapping down the road or anything, but if we were going to spend it at all, it'll come to the assembly and you can vote on it. It's just in there just in case. And then we just have a couple general fund capital project funds. The library is planning on constructing a covered shelter with the remainder of their campaign donations. This is donation money that people donated for the library. So does anyone have any questions about that for Tara? Okay, page 24. This is just RAC projects. Resource Advisory Committee, U.S. Forest Service funds. And though we just have a little bit left, we might spend it before the end of the fiscal year, but we might not for City Creek Trail, and that's the only thing we have in there for that. So. And then the last capital project, Homeland Security. Now, I know that the police department has applied, and other people, for fire department, I believe, for some Homeland Security funds. I don't know if you've been awarded them yet, or if they're still deciding.
Not following you. We had a grant that was approved earlier to replace some of the fire department vehicle radios.
Yes, and that's the $58,000. I believe there's tsunami sirens in here. Sandy, did you do that? Were you part of that?
We've been awarded that.
You've been awarded that money?
Assembly.
Okay. Okay, all right. And there's also public safety portable radios. I believe Holmgreen, Randy has applied for. And then there's harbor security cameras and Petersburg Fire Department rescue immersion suits. So though that says 2017 Homeland Security grants, I don't know where we are in that process yet, but.
So basically, we have grants to cover the $253,000 expenditure.
Yes.
Cool.
Take it.
I know none of these grants come with, I don't see any personnel, so that probably, doesn't obligate you to anything for future.
Right.
Hires?
Yeah.
You're going with that?
Yeah, or for future personnel or support or whatever. Yeah.
Randy Holmgreen's been doing it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Done a great job for us.
Yeah.
Strings can be attached sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, and if anyone has any questions for me at any time, just come and see me, or any department head about anything. We're here I'd like to, present the most accurate budget possible on Monday. Next Monday is the first reading of the budget, so if you need help, if you want to make a motion to do something and want help with the wording or the numbers, I can help with that. Yeah, anyway. If things are getting tighter and tighter each year, I had a really hard time balancing this budget. And, yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah.
Sign of the times. Okay, so any other comments by the administration or assembly members? If there isn't, I guess the work session is over.
Cool.
I'll move.